With 50 years of successful public relations experience, John Reed has had a distinguished career in public relations. Currently chairman of Consultants in Public Relations and the senior advisor to BBA Communications, Reed counsels corporations and other organizations on the international view, teaching international public relations. Reed established worldwide PR programs for Olin Corporation, Deere & Company, and Control Date Corporation. He founded Consultants in Public Relations SA in 1970, which is a worldwide network of public relations agencies serving major multinationals, public relations agencies, governments, associations, and cultural organizations. He also has been an adjunct professor at American University and was the editor of the International Public Relations Review. Reed's dedication to his career and love of public relations has not gone unrecognized. He received the first PRSA Atlas Award for Lifetime Achievement in International PR and the Gold Anvil Award of the Public Relations Society of America.
To me, it means setting a good example and teaching by setting a good example. I found in the Army the guy who could do it was the guy I'd follow, not the guy that told me to do it. I think that being successful is a leadership quality, and someone who's really successful at any profession, whether it's legal or PR, is giving a leadership quality. One of the reasons that they have medical students study surgeons and stand by them during operations is that they can see how it's done, you know, and that's a form of leadership. In PR, for me, I've had the privilege and the job of training people in a lot of countries because my field is international. And in every case, I have found that giving examples and showing and doing is the best way to teach. And if that's what leadership is, then I see it as a form of teaching. All the ones I have known, and I've known a lot of them, they've been characterized by two things. Hard work. I mean, it's pretty corny to say, but the good performers in PR are hard workers and like it and enjoy their work, and luck. Luck is that intangible that helps a lot. I've known some well-trained PR people who have failed because they had some bad luck, fate, kismet, whatever you want to call it. So good training plus good luck. If my employers and clients had known how I feel about my work, they wouldn't have paid me a dime. I'd have paid them. Because the one characteristic of my career in public relations is I love it. I got up every day and said, oh boy, what can I do now? Who can I persuade? How am I going to fix that? How do you do that? I mean, I feel like I've had a free ride. Actually, and of course, the fact of the matter is that I'm quite comfortable and I'm retired and I don't have to worry. So you can do that, you know. You can actually retire comfortably after a career in PR. But that's never been my aim. I've just loved it. I like it. I'm enthusiastic about it. I've never lost the enthusiasm for it. Students have told me in the classroom, boy, you really like this stuff, don't you? I say, yeah. And if you don't, better get another trade. I thought a lot about that question, and after over half a century at it, it's really hard to segregate and winnow and stretch down. I remember having sort of moments, you know, of oh, that's what happened. That's how that worked, and or didn't work. And moments like that are many. In Korea, the problem was there was virtually no media. The newspapers had been Japanese. The Koreans didn't want to read Japanese anymore. They wanted to speak Korean. So there was a nascent situation and not a lot in the way of newspapers. There was no TV. Radios were not all that plentiful. And the question was how to reach and persuade, i.e. do PR with, the Korean population. We studied, and I studied the Korean people a while, and I had learned the language at the time I was there before, right after World War II, 45, 46, which was Japanese, but they didn't want to speak Japanese anymore. They wanted to speak Korean. That's a tough language. Easy to write, hard to deal with. But the easy to write part meant something written in Hangul, in that language, will work. But the structure, the social structure of the Koreans in the villages was there was a chap called the Yangban, and he was the elder of the village. And he was given respect, and was due respect. And he was not elected, he was just sort of, everybody knew who it was going to be. And the Japanese had done a few things very well in Korea, one of which is to set up a mail system, a postage system. And so I went to my boss in Seoul and said, why don't we mail a newspaper to the Yangban in every village? Every Yangban can read and write. They're very literate people. He would have the obligation then to read that to the villagers. Who better to carry your message? And so we created a newspaper, got the pointy heads out of the way and made it simple, and mailed it to Korean villages. The post office was glad to have the business. The mailmen were glad to deliver it. The Yangban was glad to receive it because that made him important. These people were dirt poor at that time. And the villagers were glad to have a source of news. That was a great learning experience for me. The learning experience was, don't be seduced into thinking there's only one way, based on your experience at home, to reach people. There are a lot of different ways. And find the way that gets your message delivered properly. I thought about that a lot. What's different in terms of the leadership skills, I think, or the values, is that we are affected by our publics. Many professions and many callings are not public responsive or public affected the way we are. We really have to bend and move according to what are the values of the publics we're trying to persuade. We don't have to have those values necessarily ourselves, but we have to empathize with them in order to persuade people. You know, I don't have to become a Muslim to try to persuade Muslims, but I got to understand how Muslims think. Or I don't have to become a woman to persuade women, you know, but I have to understand. So the we really have to understand the audience's values. The first name that comes to mind is a man who died not long ago, named Jacques Coudefrejac. He was French. Coudefrejac he and his wife fled Paris when the Germans invaded in World War II, and fled south to Spain, where they were put in a camp. Eventually got loose and through the Underground Railway and boats they got to England, where Coudefrejac joined the exiled government of the president and became his spokesman. Partly on the basis that Jack was superb in English, and not a lot of French people are. They rather think that everyone should speak French. Coudefrejac stayed with the president, landed with him, marched with him down the Champs-Élysées and all the rest. And then realized he wanted to be in PR and came to the States and worked for a couple of PR agencies to learn how to do it. And then went back to Paris and opened his own agency. It became the leading agency in Paris. Coupe, as we called him, and I became friends, good friends, over many years. And I just admired him from a distance, the way he was honest, straightforward, and terribly insightful on how to persuade the French to do whatever it was that came down the road. I mean, he got the French to eat hamburgers, you know, Big Macs, and he got the French to do a lot of things that you would think were contrary to French, right? But he was good. He was just plain good at his work. I view the really outstanding PR man of history as a young Italian named Antonio Pigafetta, P-I-G-A-F-E-T-T-A. Pigafetta was a young Italian who, of a good family, but his parents died, and his uncle got him a visit to the Vatican to go to the Pope and say, "Give me a job." He was a clever student and a good writer, so the Pope said, "Well, go with the delegation I'm sending to Spain." That made him international right off. I liked him from the beginning. He went to Spain, and he was secretary to the Archbishop, who was the papal nuncio to Spain. When one day the nuncio called him in and said, "I've got a letter here. There's a guy named a guy named Magellan, I should say, Magellan, who's going to make a trip. He claims, maybe around the world, and we ought to have somebody on that trip, sort of like a spy and somebody to make a recording of it." So Pigafetta said, "I'm your guy." I already liked him again because he was adventurous. He goes down to southern Spain, near Seville, Valladolid, in fact, and joins, and Magellan says, "I don't need anybody from the church going with me around the world." And Pigafetta said, "Yeah, but I got a piece of paper here that says you're going to have to take me." And besides, he said, "I'm pretty clever. I'll keep the log and write you a good story about the trip." "Ah," says Magellan, "good idea." So he was hired on as the log keeper, and he sailed off with the 5 ships that left Spain And they sailed across the Atlantic, and they went down the coast of Brazil, and they went along the coast of Argentina, and everywhere they went, Pigafetta got off the boat, and he wrote down words of the local vocabulary. Everybody else was looking for fruit to eat, and nuts, and animals to eat, and fresh water. Pigafetta was looking for the language, the languages. Finally, of course, one ship sank, another was deserted, and 3 got around the bottom of South America and sailed off across the endless Pacific and didn't do too well. Well, 2 of them made it. And they landed in the Philippines, what later became the Philippines, the island of Cebu. In the island of Cebu, Magellan got off the boat, tried to mediate a quarrel between 2 local chiefs, one of them named Lapu-Lapu, with Pigafetta standing beside him, and Magellan was killed. So the others hustled back on the ship and sailed off and continued. And they eventually completed the trip around the bottom of Africa and up to, took almost 3 years. And when they landed in Spain, they all went to church to give thanks, and then they went up to their respective homes and so on. Pigafetta went up to the bishop that had sent him in the first place and made a report. They were thrilled. And the bishop said, "You better go up to Germany where they can print books, and you better write a book about this. This is very exciting." So Pigafetta first sent out a kind of a press release of the day, a short account, and then he wrote the book with the cooperation of, I won't mention all the people, but anyway, he got it published, which was the first notice to the world that the world is round. This was the first ships that had gone around the world, and he was the one who announced it to the world. That's a big press release. And it took a book. And then he went to home and to Italy. And after some months, he got bored and went to the Pope and said, "I need another job. I like this guy." The Pope said, "Well, I got trouble down in the Mediterranean. The people down there are having trouble with the pirates and with Arabs, killing them." Does that sound familiar? What was the name of the island? Not Malta, but I forgot the name of the island. Anyway, Pigafetta went down there to do PR for the order of monks that was trying to hold the island, and there he was killed. Pigafetta's life is an outstanding example for me of international PR, because he published in his book these glossaries of languages. The first time Europeans had ever seen, or if you're going to try to do PR, you better have the words to do it with. He made the words. He knew, he understood that, you know. He had a terrific sense of it, and so he's my personal international PR hero. The differences are the nature of the organization. Corporations are structural, and they involve large departments usually, and levels of management. And agencies are independent and deal with clients within organizations, but don't have to be going up and down the list. You have to really know what makes people tick, and you have to like that. You have to like what's different or what's the same about people and what makes them tick, because you're trying to alter their behavior. Public relations is concerned with altering the behavior by altering the thinking to start with. Vote Democratic or vote Republican. You know, eat vanilla ice cream and not chocolate. You know, and so on and so forth. So you need that kind of study and curiosity, I think. Learn languages. One isn't enough. You can't, even if you only work in English, learn languages. Our language, English, is derivative from other languages, from German, from Latin, and from French, and so forth. Study languages. All of the work of PR, virtually all of the work of PR, is done in language. Don't limit the teaching to mechanics. Don't limit it to how to indent the page for a press release. Don't limit it to formalities or little formalities of how to take a poll and so on. But get broader. And thus you'll interest the students more. And it's the interested students that'll have the best chances in the field, and the ones who become excited about it, gee, I want to do that, are the ones that are energized by the teacher. I don't think it can be taught. I think it's inherent. There are many kinds of leaders, people who lead by example and those who lead by power. But I think innately leaders rise like cream in a bottle of milk to the top. And I don't think that can be taught. Practice, practice, practice. You get to be a leader in an organization by practice, by serving on a committee and become the assistant, the vice chairman of the committee, and then becoming the chairman of the committee. That's a terrific way to learn how to lead. And that applies in PR for sure. I've seen young people go in and gradually dismiss themselves or separate themselves from the organizations. But those who go in and take an active part and move up into committees and so forth, de facto become leaders. And I think that's terrific. Any biography of someone who's successful that you admire. I think that the biographies are the best resource materials. And there are biographies of charlatans, like Ed Bernays, to name a few. And there are biographies of serious people, autobiographies. And I think they are very helpful. Tom Martin has a new one out. He was president of the Arthur Page Society. But biography. Don't think of a diploma as the end of learning, because in PR, you've got to keep learning. I mean, it's not like the times table. I mean, 3 times 1 is always going to be 3. But in PR, society changes, people change, conditions change. So when you get your degree, whether it's a bachelor's degree or a master's or even a PhD, keep studying, keep that curiosity and that interest in learning. That's the best advice I can give. I give that advice all the time. Find ways to hone your skills further and further. This is not a skill set that you have in PR that's in the box and there it is. You have to keep sharpening it and keep sharpening it because we're working in society, and society goes like this. You know, society really changes. When you live as long as I have, you know how far it's changed. I mean, what's on the radio today is far different from what was on the radio when I was a boy. And yet it's a radio. And so I have to be up to date on what are the mores and the current cultural trends that shape the audiences I have to persuade as a professional.